Hello class, this will be a quiz review for today. The quiz will be due by tomorrow 12 p.m. You will have exactly 4 questions to finish and it will all deal with geometric sequence, finding the explicit formula for that. So the main topic here is geometric sequence, specifically finding the explicit formula. That will be the main topic for today and tomorrow. Make sure that you take a look at this video and understand how to really do each of these problems before you jump into taking the quiz. Okay, so the first question that you will see is a context that looks like this. It's going to say, consider the sequence below and formulate the explicit formula. So that's number 1. And number 2, it says, use the explicit formula to find the a sub 10. So first, what I want to do is, using the sequence, I want to formulate the explicit formula. And for the geometric explicit formula, please note that it's a sub n is equal to a sub 1 times r to the power of n minus 1. I'll probably erase that just to make sure. This is being multiplied. So here, with using this explicit formula, I have one thing that's required of me, which is 1/2. But I need to find my common ratio first, right? So in order for us to do that, I always like to take the second term of the sequence divided by the first term of the sequence, or whichever way is easier. Because if I were to take the second and the first and just divide them up, I get my what I call common ratio. So here I'm going to do negative 3 over 8 divided by 1/2. Well, how do I divide a fraction? Keep, change, flip, right? This is the same thing as saying this. Go back to your like 5th, 6th grade when we're doing the dividing fractions. It's negative 3 over 8 times, keep, change the multiplication, change it into a multiplication symbol, and you'll flip this into 2 over 1. And once that's done, you will get negative 3 over 4 because these will get reduced to 4. So my common ratio is negative 3 over 4. So once I plug those in, a sub n is the first term of the sequence, which is 1/2, times the common ratio of the sequence, which is 3 over 4, to the n minus 1. Now once I have the explicit formula, the second part is pretty simple. If I'm asking you to find a sub 10, then all you got to do is just plug in 10 into the formula, negative 3 over 4, 10 minus 1, and then you will just use your calculator. So, once I type in negative 3 over 4, raised to the power of 9, because 10 minus 1 is 9, so that will be negative 0. So 1/2 times negative 0.07508 blah blah blah. I'll just divide that by 2 or multiply by 1/2, and my final answer will be negative 0.0375. I will specifically ask you to round your answer to the nearest, let's say, like 100th or 1,000th place, but it's really just up to you to decide that. I won't really mind it. So if you make it like, so for example, if you round this up to negative 0.04 or negative 0.038, those two will all be acceptable for me. Okay, that's one of the questions. Let's go to the next one. Find the common ratio, find the explicit formula, and then find the designated term. It's pretty much the same thing as the previous question. So they're asking you again to find the designated term when they're giving you the sequence like this. So again, I like to do the explicit they ask you to find the common ratio first and then find the explicit formula, which is kind of hand in hand together, like it's kind of repetitive in a way. But the common ratio r is always the second term divided by the first term. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the 30, which is my second term of the sequence, divided by the first term of the sequence, which is 60. So my common ratio is 1/2. Check. My second question is finding the explicit formula, which I know the formula should be is a sub n is equal to a sub 1 times r to the n minus 1 power. I'm going to simply plug in my first term as 60 and my common ratio as what I found in part number 1. So my final answer, a sub n, would be 60 times 1/2 to the power of n minus 1. Notice that the explicit formula always has the letter n in it. Number 3. Then find the designated term, a sub 9. Well, all I got to utilize then, it's kind of like a domino effect. I used number 1 to solve for number 2, and I used number 2 to solve for number 3. Because I'm going to use this explicit formula, 60 times 1/2 to the power of 9 minus 1. So 60 times 1/2 to the power of 8. So take your calculator out and take 1/2, raise to the power of 8, multiply by 60. And so I'm going to get 0.234 or 0.23 is fine. Next question. find the first term of the sequence, find the explicit formula, and then find the designated term in the sequence. So in these questions, they ask you to find the designated term, but they give you the common ratio and they give you a random term in the sequence. So it's not always going to be the first term. So my first job is to actually go back and find it. So to find the first term of the sequence, I have to be utilizing my explicit formula, which is a sub 8 is equal to a sub 1 times the common ratio 4 to the power of 8 minus 1. Now, if you're confused as to where this came from, it's the same thing as I have been doing before, but I'm plugging in the numbers here and here. So I know that n value is 8, and I know that r value is 4, and I know this a sub 8 is same thing as saying 100. So 100 times a sub 1 times 4 to the power of 7. Well, 4 to the power of 7 is 16384. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to divide both sides by this. And then I'm going to get a sub 1 is equal to 100 divided by that answer right there. And then you're going to get 0.006 basically. So once I have this value here, I'm going to take this 0.006 and then I'm going to multiply it by the common ratio of 4 raised to the power of n minus 1. That's going to give you a sub n. This is going to be your explicit formula of the sequence. And then if I want to find the designated term, which is a sub 3, all I got to do is plug in 3 for my n value. So 0.006 times 4 to the power of 3 minus 1. So that times 4 to the raised to the power of 2. My final answer for a sub 3, I get 0.0976. That's because I didn't probably round it, but if I were to get the answer that you guys might see, then you guys might see that it's 0.096 if you were to just use this. That's fine. Either way is honestly fine for me, but preferably if you were to just keep the decimal value intact, because it's not 0.006, it's 0.006103516. That's what I get. But of course, you don't have to use the exact value, approximately, because these two come out to be relatively close enough. I'll accept that as the answer as well. Okay, last question, in which I didn't go over this with you guys yesterday, and I told you guys specifically I wanted to go over this today. I'm giving you the two terms in the sequence, and then find the common ratio first, then find the first term, and then find the explicit formula, and also then find the designated term. So you actually have 4 parts to do, A, B, C, and D. Because it's a very elaborate problem, I'm only going to give you one of these questions to do on the quiz, and you can see how time-consuming this could be. Now, the very first thing that we need to first solve for is finding the common ratio R. That will actually quite honestly be the easiest one. For me, there's a lot of ways in which you can do this. For me, what I like to do is I like to just think of this as a common sense, or you can use the explicit formula. It doesn't really matter. If the third term in the sequence is 36, that's the third term. Fourth term, fifth term. I don't really care about the first two terms because I don't know what it is and it doesn't tell me what it is. So I need to multiply 36 by common ratio R twice to get to my fifth term of the sequence from the third. And that happens out to be 324. So what that would mean is, it means that 36, my third term in the sequence, times R twice, in other words, times R squared, gives me my designated term of the fifth sequence, which is 324. Now, if I have it in the equation format, it makes it so much easier for us to solve, because divide both sides by 36 like this, R squared is 324 divided by 36, which is 9, and then I get R to be positive 3. Now, if you're wondering how come R can't be a negative 3, well, it's particularly because if it was that's actually a good question. It possibly could be a negative 3, but I will suppose that assuming that R would just be positive number, R is greater than 0, you just always want to think of it as just positive number in this case. It can go either way. It doesn't really matter for this question, because even if you were to multiply negative 3 twice, because it's negative times negative, it will still make it positive anyways. Well, anyways, I found my common ratio to be 3, and that's that. Then I want to find the first term in the sequence. Now this time I'm going to go backwards. So if I wanted to find the first term in the sequence, a sub 1, then I have a sub second term and a sub 3, the third term in the sequence. which also turns out to be 36. So instead of going in the multiplying direction, I'm going in the opposite direction. Okay? So whatever this a sub 1 is, I am multiplying this by the common ratio of 3 twice, because if we're thinking of it from the a sub 1's perspective, multiply by r, and then I get 36. So a sub 1 times 3 squared is equal to 36. Well, 3 squared is 9, so this becomes a sub 1 times 9 is 36, so a sub 1 should be 4. So I have those. For part C, it's really quite simple because you're just utilizing part A and part B's answer and just chugging them in, right? A sub n, the explicit formula, says that it's the first term in the sequence 4 times the common ratio of 3 raised to the power of n minus 1. And that's it. Now I'm going to do my last question for the day, which is finding the a sub 12. And this is also a piece of cake as long as I have my part C to be correct. So a sub 12 is the same thing as saying 4 times 3 to the power of 12 minus 1. 4 times 3 to the 11th power. Oh boy, that's going to be a very big number. But then it's going to be 708,588. 708,000. Okay? So you will see pretty much the exact same nature of these types of questions on the quiz. Make sure you finish them within the designated time, which is due tomorrow. You can spend today to study over it. Go over it with your friends, and then just submit it to me by tomorrow by 12 p.m. in the afternoon. Thank you, and take care of yourselves, and have a great weekend.